Slag enters the fray by ambushing Dirge and Ramjet, blasting them through the chest and taking them out.
Go beyond! Plus!
What's up, Beyonders? James here, and we are back with Transformers Monstrosity. As we did in the last video, we are starting off with the Decepticons again. So we start off with Megatron traversing Junkion's howling wastes as this ionized acid rain comes down, burning through his plate. Megatron says even the storms in this world can kill. Despite that, Megatron wants to keep moving, but he ends up deciding to wait out the storm in this wrecked starship. As he enters the ship, this voice calls out to him to step into the darkness, and Megatron asks this voice who they are. The voice answers, "I am in exile like yourself, a king without a throne. I am called Pentious." Now this is awesome, and here's why. Pentious is a quintessent, specifically a quintessent judge, who is the race's leaders. Their physical characteristics consist of 5 rotating faces, representing different aspects of their race. So you have Pentious's current face representing death. The other 4 faces have different meanings depending on who you ask. So we have the face of wrath or rage. You have the war face, or some people will say the smiling face, the face of wisdom, and the last one is the face of judgment. Others will say doubt, but I think judgment is more fitting because it's more in line with the nature of what quintessent judges do. It's no surprise we are seeing one of their kind in this story because Flint Dille, who co-wrote the Autocracy trilogy, was a story consultant on the Transformers 1986 film, where they made their first appearance. Pentious tells Megatron that he's been trapped on Junkion for hundreds of years within his starship's wreckage, and claims he knew he would come. He tries to warn him that the way off Junkion is dark and twisted, but Megatron says, "I fear nothing." Pentious replies as he switches to the face of wrath. "Perhaps, but to survive this monstrous world, you must become monstrous yourself." From there, we return to Kokular, shortly after Scorponok took control of the Decepticons. Through his discussion with Starscream, we learned that they're aware that Optimus formed a convocation with the various faction leaders, and that it really didn't go well. They also know the convocation's plans to restore Energon to the Taurus states. Starscream wonders though where they would get more Energon since Zeta and his Vampire weapons drain the emergency reserves. This is when Scorponok reveals to him his plans to steal the Energon from the Taraxis mega refinery that holds 8 billion megaliters of refined Energon. Now, they're not aware that the Dinobots are currently stealing from the facility, but Scorponok's plans are not just to steal it, it's a lot worse. He wants to throw the global Energon production into all-out chaos, because that will make the convocation tear itself apart over the scraps, leaving Optimus and the Autobots easy prey. Back at Junkion, Megatron surmises that the planet must have a spaceport. Pentious, having studied the schematics of the planet, informs Megatron that the Pillar of Rust, a massive mound of wrecked ships and waste, may hold the answer, but the only safe passage is through the eye of the acid rainstorm. Megatron asks why anyone would travel to this forsaken world. Pentious explains it's to hunt, to be tested. Everything about Junkion is cruel. It's a place of terrible purity where only the strong and unmerciful can survive. He tells Megatron he must face its challenge or be devoured by it. I love this so much. I love this journey Megatron is on, but I want to mention that there is much more than meets the eye here. Yeah, I said it. We'll learn what that is eventually, but in the meantime, Megatron frees Pentious and then wraps a chain around him. He tells him he will be his slave and guide him to the Pillar of Rust. Later they reach the corroded shore, an acid sea that lies between them and the Pillar of Rust. Pentious urges him to proceed cautiously because the acid sea can eat through anything, but Megatron fears nothing. He reminds Pentious of the chain around him, and if he should fall, so will he. As they begin to cross, Pentious warns him something stirs in the sea, and boom, the Sharkticons come leaping out of the sea and pull Megatron in. Now, Pentious doesn't get pulled in because Megatron released his grip. The Sharkticons are pretty cool. They are bots with a head and teeth resembling a shark with a round body and a spiked mace tail. Now, they are called the Sharkticons, but they act more like piranhas. A group of them will swarm their prey and tear it apart. Moments later, we see Megatron rise out of the acid sea with one of the Sharkticon's spiked mace tails in hand, bashing one of them with it and tearing another with his bare hands. But he's eventually overwhelmed by them and pulled back into the sea. From here, we go to the Dinobots at the Terex's mega refinery. Snarl at some point finally arrived with the fuel tanker. Slag mentions to Swoop that it's now at capacity, and how if they really were criminals, they could live like kings off this score. However, Swoop reminds him that they really wouldn't be able to because they'll cause serious damage if they snap. We'll see what that looks like pretty soon. It's coming. Grimlock interrupts their conversation, basically telling them to shut up and keep working. He and Slag go at it again, which leads to Slag storming off. Now I want to quickly transition from the Dinobots to Optimus Prime, who we see is meeting with Die Atlas at the Autobot sparring arena. Optimus is trying to get Die Atlas on his side because remember in the last video he spoke out against Optimus being the new Prime. So Optimus is trying here to gain his support. He starts by reassuring him that he isn't Zeta Prime. He will fight to protect the people of Cybertron, but in order to do that, he needs soldiers. Specifically soldiers with integrity and character that the Circle of Light can reach. Die Atlas refuses because he doesn't want his followers to die for the sake of his crusade. Optimus points out that the Decepticons will mistake the Circle of Light's pacifism for weakness and hit them all worse than before. Optimus's words anger Die Atlas. When his next sparring sequence begins, Die Atlas activates his wrist sabers and takes out all these sparring bots in just one move. I told you guys you were going to get a glimpse of how dangerous these guys can be. Now you and I would describe what the Circle of Light practices as pacifism, but Die Atlas wouldn't call it that. He explains that it's patriotism. He knows combat, knows the terrible cost of war, and unrestrained hatred. He believes violence will only lead to more violence. Later in this video, I will explain why I have an issue with Die Atlas's reasoning for not helping Optimus. In the meantime, back at the Terex's mega refinery, dawn approaches, and the Dinobots have successfully filled their tankers. However, this victory is short-lived when the Decepticons arrive and attack them. The Dinobots fall back to the refinery. Grimlock orders Swoop and Snarl to give him cover. When he realizes they can't escape, he decides to make a call. Slag enters the fray by ambushing Dirge and Ramjet, blasting them through the chest and taking them out. Scorponok approaches, telling Grimlock and the Dinobots that they have gone from pit champions to street thugs, that they should have run when they had the chance. Grimlock informs him if they left, they would have missed him and the Decepticons get their butt kicked. When Scorponok says it's ridiculous that Grimlock believes he and the Dinobots can take them, Grimlock reveals he wasn't talking about the Dinobots, he was talking about the Autobots. We then see Skylynx flying in, roaring. Once he lands, he unloads the Autobots. Optimus leads the charge and yells Decepticons surrender and prepare to be taken into custody. Ironhide, Bumblebee, Ratchet, Ultra Magnus, and surprisingly, Die Atlas are by his side. As the battle between Autobots and Decepticons begins, Grimlock orders the Dinobots to fall back into the refinery. An enraged Scorponok, wanting to get revenge on Grimlock, orders Starscream and the Seekers to hold their position and keep the Autobots distracted until Tankor is done fueling. Optimus notices this, so he orders Ironhide to secure the area and asks Die Atlas to help him apprehend the terrorists. Die Atlas, of course, refuses, stating that he's here to observe and see the cost of Optimus's war. It's here I want to bring up my issue with Die Atlas. He calls this patriotism, but in all reality, it's pacifism. The refusal to participate in a war or commit any act of violence and be opposed to it. Look, pacifists are admirable, but only if they're right. I would agree with that position if this war were between Zeta Prime and Megatron. The war between them wasn't justified, and both sides committed atrocities and were willing to do anything that would lead them to victory. Initially, Megatron's cause was justified, as I've mentioned before, but over time he became like the enemy he hated and wanted to rule Cybertron through total control. That isn't the case with Optimus. He is genuinely trying to repair the damage done to Cybertron and unite the people, especially when the situation on Cybertron is dire. Die Atlas is unwilling to put aside his personal morals for a justifiable war that would help the planet and its people. I would like to know what you guys think about all this. Now, as the Dinobots are within the refinery, they're surprised by a blast from Scorponok and his Decepticons. Scorponok orders Blitzwing to fire at them again, but Grimlock convinces him to do it himself. The gladiator match of the century, Grimlock vs. Scorponok, begins. Now the fight between them goes back and forth. When Scorponok gains the upper hand, he recalls their days as gladiators, telling Grimlock how he was one of the greatest gladiators, and Megatron thought he had so much potential. This is one of the missed opportunities in my opinion in the origin of Megatron series, not going into detail on Megatron's life as a gladiator. It would have been cool to see his hardships and his relationships with other gladiators. We know Megatron and Grimlock must have known each other because we saw Grimlock and the Dinobots at Megatron's secret meeting calling the gladiators of Chaos to join him. Grimlock becomes enraged and he stabs Scorponok with his burning energon sword. And it doesn't end there. He slices his hand off and smashes him in the face. Grimlock begins changing into a mindless beast, his alt mode triggering as he says kill. Swoop and Snarl see Grimlock going berserk and hold him down. So this is the Dinobots' great secret. When they become enraged, their Dino alt mode begins to take over, turning them into wild beasts. A future chapter will reveal how they came to have Dino alt modes. Grimlock begins roaring, "Kill you all." Optimus appears and shoots him. Once Grimlock gets a hold of himself, Optimus informs him that he knows about him and the Dinobots, how they've been off the grid for a long time. He asks about this disturbing alt form, since it isn't in their file. Grimlock reveals that it's the reason why they need to leave Cybertron. He pleads with Optimus to let them go, and this is where Optimus makes a major mistake. He refuses because the Dinobots have not only broken the law, but are just as dangerous as the Decepticons in his eyes. Atlas tries to even convince him to let them go, but Optimus still refuses. Grimlock desperately dives toward the Taraxis Mega Refinery's fusion regulator, threatening to deactivate it. He says, "You should have just let us go. There's no Cybertron for us anymore. I'm so sick of all your petty factions and moral posturing. I hate it, and this monster inside of me wants to make you all pay." Optimus tries to convince him to stand down by telling him that if he deactivates it, thousands of Cybertronians will die from the explosion's fire. He reminds Grimlock that the Dinobots once served the people as a primal vanguard. He asks Grimlock to please serve them and stand down. Grimlock backs down and admits he doesn't want to hurt anyone. Suddenly, Scorponok dives toward the regulator, laughing while saying, "Disappointing as always, Grimlock, but you were right about being a monster. Deep down, we're all monsters." Optimus yells no, but it's already too late. Scorponok deactivates the regulator and the refinery explodes. All we see is a flash of light. I hate to leave you all on a cliffhanger, but that's the end of the video. I told you guys you weren't ready for Monstrosity. If you want more Transformers content, check out my latest Shattered Glass video right here. Be on the lookout for the next set of Monstrosity chapters. Other than that, have an awesome day, take care, and always remember every day to transform and go beyond. See you later, Beyonders.